want to try to run this is that to avoid anybody like talking over each other, so that we have a clear record and all those things, I'm going to put everybody on mute as we go through the agenda, and then over on the participant panel on the side, you can raise your hand, and when you do that, it'll show up in over here on the side for me that you're raising your hand, and then I'll call on you, unmute you, so that you can ask whatever question or say whatever comments you want to make. And then I'll put you back on mute. If I'm not seeing you or something, you can wave in your screen. And Cindy Lou is going to help me keep track of everybody to make sure that there's not somebody that I'm missing. So does everybody know how to raise your hand?
I just got rid of my panelist view thingy on accident.
I think if you...
Yes.
Cindy, do you want to...
Yeah, so Amy, when you roll over your video, are you on a computer?
Uh-huh.
When you roll over your own event screen, there's a small bar that will show up on the bottom, and it has like your mic and your video.
Ah, yes.
And then there's a bubble with a person. If you click on that so that it turns blue, it'll open up your participant panel. And at the base of the participant panel is what Chris is referring to raise and lower your hand.
Got it. Alrighty.
It's also where you'll mute your microphone.
How come I can't raise my hand? Is it because I'm the host?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh. Hold on. My dogs are play fighting. Just... Come on out, puppies.
So currently, Andrew is not on mute, but you're in a very quiet place.
Welcome. It's a gift.
Amy's giving us a tour of her house.
Cindy Lou,
Yes.
this is Erin. I'm tapping on the person with the red dot above their head, and I don't see a raise my hand option. I see like questions and polling. Am I missing something?
So at the bottom menu where we were referencing where the panelist buttons are, there's also a chat button, and that would be where the red dot would be, the little messenger picture. So I'm wondering if you opened up chat, and the participant panel can collapse.
Sorry, I'm challenged here.
You're okay.
Oh, I see it. Yes,
Okay.
thank you. So anyway, if you go vertical with your phone, it's easier to see it. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, so does everybody feel comfortable getting started? If you're not comfortable feeling started or getting started, or give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go. Okay. Okay, cool, thank you. And then I'm just gonna assume that Anna is ready to go since I can't see her face. Let me unmute you really quick. Anna, are you ready to go?
She is running an errand.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
she's listening, but anticipating to just be quiet for a little bit.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I guess then let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to read just a little thing to start us off about the coronavirus. So Cindy, will you tell me when we're live or whatever?
You are
Oh.
live.
Cool.
You
Okay.
are live on all streaming feeds.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I want to welcome everybody to today's City Council meeting. This is our first City Council meeting that's being held entirely over the internet, so I thank everybody for tuning in. And I also want to apologize in advance for any hiccups that we might have, since this is the first time that we're doing this. But we hope to be able to have public access throughout this process, and so thank you for listening and for being here. Due to the declarations of emergency and everyone's hope to keep each other safe, social distancing, we are going to conduct this entire meeting remotely. Most of our council and administrative staff will also be joining remotely. Although it's odd to have us all in a meeting electronically, this is still considered an open and public meeting. Since today's meeting is a work session only, we don't have a public comment period. We welcome members of the public who may be watching or using live video feeds on the council's agenda page, YouTube, SLC TV, or Facebook Live. Comments are always welcome via our council.comments@slcgov.com email address, or you can call our 24-hour comment line. The number for that is 801-535-7654. As a reminder, since we're connecting electronically, there may be some delay in people's comments and discussion items, more so than usual. Since this is a new way of conducting the public's business in unusual circumstances, if you have feedback on today's meeting setup, please let us know. For future items involving public comment, please stay tuned or check out our website for more, or social media for more information on how to participate. Okay, so I will take us now to our first item on the agenda, which, so our first item on the agenda was an updated briefing, a briefing on the Korean Pavilion donation, which was just a written briefing. Did anybody have any questions on that? Okay, I don't see any hands on my hand screen. Did we send out, did we send out an updated agenda based on the changes that we made in Chair Vice Chair?
Yes, we sent it out to administrative staff people in email and tried to circulate it as wide as we could. And there's also an updated names agenda in everybody's email.
Okay, let me go to that.
It should be from Linda at 3:06 p.m.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay. So the second item on our agenda, which we're taking out of order from the agenda items that were, from the agenda that was posted online. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Is the Cleveland Court, and this was formerly agenda item number 2. Oh, and it continues to be agenda item number 2. Okay, and then we have the petitioner should be calling in as well. So do we have? All right, go ahead and take us through this agenda item.
All right, council members, sorry, we
Hold on, we just need to, Councilmember Wharton,
Yes.
please mute my microphone and unmute council office microphone.
Yes.
testing, does that work now? Okay, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
I didn't see a council office microphone. So I hope that did that right.
okay, well, so far so good.
Okay.
So we'll start. This is the proposed amendment to the Central Community Master Plan, future land use map, and to rezone the property at 1430 South, 400 East. This is also known as Cleveland Court. The change to the Central Community Master Plan, future land use map would be from low-density residential to medium-density residential, and it would rezone the property from RMF 35 to FBUN 1. The applicant has also requested reduced setbacks in the front and rear yards for an attached garage. The Planning Commission has approved the plan development request. However, it is subject to the City Council approving the master plan and rezone amendments. So we have the applicant here, Peter Caroon. He's in the room with us, and he'll step up to the mic if the council has any questions on this. Just going through planning's presentation right now. This is a picture. Hopefully everybody can see this now. This is a picture of the existing parcel. The development, then there's a picture of also the proposed development that could occur there. How do I skip through this?
Okay. Council members, are there any questions on this item? I am not seeing any hands. Let me make sure, though. Oh, yes. Councilmember Mono.
Am I unmuted?
Yep.
So is that Nick Norris that was speaking, or?
No, that was Nick Tarbett.
Carbon.
Oh, Nick Tarbett, okay. I was just wondering on I saw this project on the Planning Commission, and now as a council member, I've gotten a lot of comments from the public, not necessarily specifically about this, though some have been, but talking about the sort of rationale behind doing spot zoning and taking one individual parcel and zoning it in a way that is different than all of the surrounding parcels. So I was just wondering if maybe as a general note, we could if planning staff could discuss that rationale, given that we're going to FBUN in an area that has no FBUN around it. I don't know if now is the appropriate time for those questions or not.
So, Councilmember Mono, we do have Nick Norris on the line as an attendee just yet.
Okay.
As the host, Councilmember Wharton just needs to permit him to be a panelist if you'd like him to address your question.
Yes, just a second.
Great. And I don't know if there was more to the presentation if we were going to get more into the specific discussion. I know when it came to Planning Commission, there were a lot more images, and we saw the proposed development. And in general, I think the commission, if I remember correctly, there was quite a bit of discussion about it, but in general, it felt like what was proposing was compatible. My question is more about the idea of the zone being compatible.
Okay, Nick Norris, go ahead.
Yeah, so generally, a spot zoning is a situation where the master plan doesn't support a zoning amendment. So even if a master plan ends up supporting something and it's just a small piece of a broader area, it's generally not considered a spot zoning. That's because sometimes the change has to happen incrementally and over time as property owners are open to those changes.
Okay, so in this case where we're amending the master plan and the zoning map,
Correct. This really wouldn't be considered a spot zoning. It is unusual to have a small piece like this, but because the applicant is proposing to update the master plan as well, they're avoiding any kinds of issues with spots.
okay, and I guess just to address constituent concerns about that, is this kind of in general something that is you would consider good practice? Or
In terms of, I guess I'm not understanding the question. You mean in terms of the size of the proposal?
I mean, I guess if we don't call it spot zoning, which is whether it can be technically defined as that or not, but the idea being that there is one specific parcel that is, whether it's congruent with the master plan and the zoning map or not, or the master plan or not, one specific parcel that is zoned and master planned quite a bit differently than the surrounding. I mean, I think that's what the constituent concerns that I've been hearing are.
Yeah, I understand that concern, but it's also not unusual. There's a number of places in the city where we'll have a block of what is mostly single-family homes, and then we'll have some other use, whether it's a small apartment, townhomes, a small commercial building, or some other zone on a corner. And so this proposal actually does kind of fit that development pattern in the city. And I think on the slide, if you look, there are other multifamily uses in this general area. And I think in the staff report, there's some more information about that as well. There you go. So the property's already zoned for multifamily. And in many cases, this FBU-1 zone is more compatible than what could be potentially happen in the RMF zones, primarily because of the types of housing that are allowed. The RMF would allow multifamily apartment types of things, where this is limited to the townhomes as the most intense level of housing.
Saying the FBU-1 is limited to townhomes?
Correct.
Okay, and again, these are all just addressing constituent concerns, but the one major difference between RMF and FBUN, at least as relates to this neighborhood, would be that FBUN1 does not require. Am I correctly? Though, to my understanding, the proposed development does provide adequate parking.
Yeah, that's correct. The FBUN1, I'd have to double check if the ordinance requires parking, but I think it does require one stall for this kind of use per unit.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Okay, are there?
I think those are all.
All right, thank you. I'm going to mute you now. Are there any other questions? Oh, Andrew Johnston, go ahead.
Thanks. In looking through the planning commission notes from January, it looks like, the question was brought up about public engagement. And it sounds like they talked about it, but there's nothing in here about what that was and if there needs to be some more. Can somebody address that piece?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question. Can you repeat that?
Sure. In the planning commission notes that were attached in the report from January, it looks like there was discussion about, pull it up here, whether there was sufficient concerns about lack of neighborhood engagement. Basically, was the neighborhood engaged? How are they engaged? Is it enough? Does it need more discussion with the neighbors to understand the intention and the use of this parcel?
I would ask if if Mayara Lima's listed, if she would have a better answer to that than I can provide. She should be on.
Councilmember Wharton, can you bring her on?
Yeah. Hold on just a second. Yeah. Okay.
Mayara,
Mayara, go ahead. Wait, hold on. Maybe I need to unmute you. Just a second. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so for this project, we send out early notification to property owners and tenants within 300 feet of the property. The applicant participated in the Liberty Wells Community Council after we sent out the 45-day notice to the community organization. And the applicant presented the project to them. So those were the two public engagement that we had for this project.
Okay. Thank you. If Councilmember Johnston and Mono, would you put your hands down unless you have other questions?
I have another question.
Okay, go ahead.
Another thing that caught my attention was I like the idea of this level of density. I do had a question that was, I think, asked in the planning commission as well about location of driveways, how it'll interact with those two streets and the neighbors. Somebody talk to that a little bit. I know that the plans may be a little tentative, but give me a sense of that. So what I'm really concerned about is a sort of a house with the first floor being a massive, well, basically the garage space. That's about it. And I see on the plans it's not necessarily like that, but give me a sense of.
Mayara, are you going to take that, or would you like us to address that?
Sorry, I thought that was a question for the applicant. I prefer that the applicant answer that.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, we do have Peter Caroon in the room. He could answer those development-specific questions for you if you want. We can wait until when you're ready for that.
Okay, I think now is a fine time. We don't have any other questions lined up, so Peter, if you want to come up and.
Are you good? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. I've actually staged a coup. I've taken over, Mayor, if you're still there. Council members, I've named all the security guards as the new council members, so no need to come.
Don't let Peter out.
No need to come back. But thanks for letting me in. I'm probably the only guy in the room who didn't have a computer on his microphone, or a microphone on his computer, so Nick was kind enough to let me come in. This project, the company I work for, Century Financial, purchased from the prior owner. It was a 5-unit project with larger, more expensive units. We decided that it would be better to have 7 units versus the 5 larger units. And I know there was some question, it was about community engagement. Really, the feedback from some members of the community, which we felt was opposite of what we were actually planning, was that there wasn't enough community engagement with the design. Whereas the design has a courtyard, so our goal was actually to have the residents be able to engage with each other through the courtyard, and also therefore be able to engage with the community. So it was one of those meetings where things sort of got off on a strange tangent, and people started saying that this design wasn't a design that would create community engagement, where our goal again was to have the residents engage with each other through this community courtyard as well as with the neighboring properties. The project is, as I said, 7 units versus 5 units. Our goal was to create really more of a missing middle project than higher end condo units. The 7 units actually sits on almost exactly the same footprint as the 5-unit project. So it's not necessarily a bigger project, it just has more units. And the RMF 35 zone didn't allow that zoning, or didn't allow that 7-unit project versus the 5-unit project. It's an environmentally sustainable project. We're building it to be energy efficient. We're going to put solar on the roof as well. This project was supported by the Community Council as well when we went to the Community Council meeting. The current zoning, the RMF 35 zoning, also allows for 35 feet in a 3-story building, whereas our proposed height is 27 and a half feet in a 2-story building. So we're not building to the maximum density that's allowed under the current zoning. And under the RMF 35 zone, our original plan had a less than a 10-foot backyard. Now it has a 15-foot backyard. And we did work with Nick Norris and some of the planning staff to readjust the yards so that it met what they thought was a better setback design for the property. There have been some complaints about density. I think that's, if you've heard some complaints, that's part of it. But within 3 blocks, there are 44 properties that have 4 or more units. Within that same distance, there's also 10 properties with 8 or more units. So it's not just a single-family neighborhood. It does have several multifamily projects. And as I mentioned earlier, our goal was to have more affordable units, some of that missing middle pricing. So if they're rented out, for example, the 1-bedrooms would be about $1,000. The 3-bedrooms would be about $2,000. If they were only 5 units, the rents would probably have to be $2,000 for a 1-bedroom and probably $3,000 for a 3-bedroom. We are building them as condos, so they will be a higher quality building. The form-based zone, unlike the current RMF 35 zone, also has design standards, so the design is required to be nicer than what it would otherwise be in the RMF 35 zone. And then somebody brought up parking. There are 8 garages. There are also probably about 8 driveway spaces, not including the ones on Cleveland Court or Cleveland Avenue, which is a short driveway. But so, they could have about 16 cars in the area. When I've been in that area, there really haven't been a lot of cars parked in the street either. So I think there's ample street parking as well for guests and things. So the Planning Commission recommended it, the Community Council recommended it, and we're hoping that in the upcoming meetings that you'll support it as well. So thank you for your time, and honored to be here with you on this historic moment with empty chambers here. So it's been interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here with us.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council members, any other questions? I see it. Councilmember Mono.
Yes. So in response to, I know that as a council, we're not looking at the plan development. Planning Commission, there were 3 items. But in response to Councilmember Johnston's question about the street, garages on that street, Peter, can you talk about what your plan are? I believe, if I remember correctly, and Mayara can correct me if I'm wrong, the Planning Commission approved the plan development subject to the condition that entrances would be placed along 4th East and have features such as a porch or stoop or canopy. Can you talk about your plans to comply with that?
Yeah, so under the form-based zoning, you're required actually to put the garages in the alley if you have an alley. So where we have an alley, which we do, we do have garages back there. The one issue with this property is basically it's surrounded by rights of way on 3 of the 4 sides. So there's not a lot of options in terms of where you place your garages. You really need to you need to have the garages facing. Obviously, they have to be on a right of way, but since it's surrounded by 3 sides, it's sort of an interesting property in that way. But we did readjust the garages per the planning staff's recommendations and moved them. We had a couple on 4th East. We moved one around the corner to be on Cleveland, so it wasn't on 4th East. It was just more of a highly trafficked area. I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully that gives you some guidance as to why we put the garages where we did.
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand. The conditions in the staff report or in the planning commission approval talked about entry features such as a porch or stoop with canopy.
Yeah, correct. So
2 pedestrian entries.
Sorry to interrupt. So we will comply.
This image that we're looking at.
This one.
And this image we're looking at will be updated.
I've got bad eyes, but this one I don't think shows the canopy on it. But we will comply with what was requested by the planning staff and what was recommended in the planning commission decision.
Council members, any other questions? Oh, Mayara Lima, I see your hands raised. Did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify the conditions that Councilmember Mono was talking about. So it's the 2 pedestrian entries and this picture would be the right-hand side would have entry features, and then the units facing Cleveland will have primary entrances. So where you're seeing those sliding doors, they would actually have to have primary entrances. That's what the condition of approval for the plan developments were.
Okay. Nick Norris.
Yes, I wanted to clarify a statement I made earlier. I checked the ordinance, and the FBUN1 zone does not have a minimum parking requirement, although this project is providing parking for each unit.
Okay. Thank you. Put your hand down. Any other questions from council members? Anything that anyone else wants to add? Okay, I don't see any other questions or anything, so I think we can move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Mayara.
Thank you.
Okay. Next.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a discussion of policy and budget issues relating to the threat of virus outbreak. This was formerly item number 10 on our agenda. We eliminated some items of business on the agenda that are less pressing, so that and enlarged the amount of time for this so that we could have more of a discussion.
Councilmember Wharton, if I could just let you know, Councilmember Valdemoris is attending, just needs to be bumped to a panelist position, if you could. Thank you.
Yep.
You also have Lisa Schaefer as a panelist, or as an attendee who needs to move to panelist, and Rachel is not yet listed as an attendee. So Lisa and Anna would be great. Thanks.
Okay, just added them both. Okay, so I will go to Lisa to start us off, and or should I go to Mayor Mendenhall to start us off?
Yes, please. Mayor Mendenhall would be great.
Time.
Yes.
Lisa, did you say Lisa Schaefer's on as well?
Yes.
I'm happy. Actually, Lisa, will you start? Because I know you have the details in front of you, and then I'd like to answer that.
Okay, great.
I'll mute.
Okay, and it looks like we have Chief of Staff Rachel Otto as well.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
Hi. First of all, I would just like to say thank you for lumping some items and elevating this issue quickly. Obviously, we're dealing with a situation that's evolving very quickly. We have shifted a lot of priorities within Budget Amendment 4 to deal with our response to issues related to COVID-19. What we're suggesting right now is that we potentially hold $2 million in the budget to deal with employee-related issues. These things might be overtime, paid administrative leave, sick time, merit employee overtime, and other unforeseen things that we're not aware of quite yet, but we want to hold $2 million in reserve. The remaining $4 million on that light item, we would like to put into a holding account that would be reserved for issues related to COVID-19 response. And we would come back to the council as we identify those items as they come up, and ask for permission to get those items released as we see them arise. Rachel, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I'd like to just thank you in advance for your flexibility on this. I know it's been quite a scramble. It's been difficult to keep everyone apprised and working in the same direction. And I know that our staff and your staff have both been working kind of basically around the clock and double time on this stuff. So thank you very much.
Okay, council members, are there any questions? Or actually, no, do we want to hear from the mayor now?
Thank you.
Yes.
Briefly, the priorities as I see it for the city or for the administration at least are, number one, that we are protecting the health and well-being of our community. I think second is that we are protecting the viability of our healthcare system, and that includes our public safety workers, so 911, police, and fire. Third, I think, is the continuation of city services and kind of keeping the wheels on the city as we roll through this. And fourth would be supporting the resilience of our economy. And I know that they're all interrelated, and they could probably shuffle in priority if we open it up to discussion. But generally, that's how we've been operating. And I appreciate this opportunity to amend the budget amendment. I think that although I don't believe in fate, it's hard to not imagine how wonderful a coincidence it is that we had a budget amendment coming through here with really an unprecedented amount of one-time revenue. And man, there were some really cool things I wanted to propose to you that we spend the money on, and then COVID-19 came along. And it's fortunate that we have some one-time revenue in hand that we can look at setting aside to do those, 4 basic priorities. And as we get through the approval process in the coming weeks for Budget Amendment 4, we would like to begin, I think we started this conversation yesterday with Council Chair and Vice Chair and Cindy Gus Jensen, that we start to work together on what those specific priorities are for the funding that we hope to set aside. Obviously, keeping Salt Lake City Corporation functioning, supporting our employees, and supporting our residents, therefore, is our number one job. But then how we distribute new funding opportunities for maintaining our residents' ability to have housing and the deferred costs of the things that we're deferring at this time, including some of the utility components, supporting small businesses, et cetera. We want to be in a collaborative conversation with the council about the decisions we make prioritizing those needs, because surely there won't be enough money and we'll have to make decisions quickly. Speed is of the essence here. So thank you for your flexibility and hearing from us today and working with us as we try to remedy this as best we can. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've just added Ben Collier from Economic Development, but first I want to ask if any council members have any questions so far. Okay, seeing none, then we'll go now to
Councilmember Horton.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, Councilmember Dugan had his hand raised. I know it's hard to
did he?
see with the number of panelists that you have. I'm just letting you know.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Dugan.
Yes, Mayor. The $2 million, how long did we think that would last? Is that for 6 months, 3 months?
That's a better question for Ben Collender.
I'm sorry, I apologize, Mr. Chair. Can I interrupt really quickly to clarify something? So there are a couple different things at play here. And one is in Budget Amendment 4, we've asked for the $2 million to be set aside and allocated now, and then the $4,090,000 portion of that funding under the coronavirus line item in the budget to be released later after we have a collaborative conversation with you all about how to prioritize those funds. And then there's another item that allocates an additional $1 million to the EDLF, and that I think is what Councilmember Dugan might be referring to. So that's the potential shift in how the EDLF is allocated that would allow us to provide emergency quick assistance to small businesses. And that's the document that hopefully some of you had a chance to review yesterday that outlines the parameters around the EDLF, that shift in function of the EDLF going forward. So that would be what Ben Collender could chime in on and answer specifics about how that program is how we're hoping that program will shape up, and other items related to the EDLF specifically.
Okay.
Does that help at all?
Yes.
Okay.
But, I'm going to turn it over to Ben now. That okay? Okay. Then go ahead. Or maybe you can't. I can't unmute Ben for some reason.
We're trying to unmute him on this side.
Hi, Ben. So Ben Collender, we actually can't see any audio or video from you. If you go to just your media event, your event page, where you can probably see your initials, at the baseline, there's a menu bar.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, was that Lisa?
Yeah, that's me. In case Councilmember Dugan's question was regarding the $2 million for employee issues, we don't know exactly how long that will last. We can tell you that half of payroll is about 4.5 million. So we're just taking a conservative estimate on the $2 million.
Mayor Mendenhall?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I thought you had your hands up. You can take your hand down then.
No, you mean this hand?
No, your little hand on your,
Mr. Chair?
yes. Yeah.
So Lisa, when you say payroll is 4 point some odd million, is that for a year, per month, for a 2-week period?
That is for half of a year.
Okay, for 6 months, okay. So 2 million, maybe 3 months worth of additional pay for city employees.
I'm gonna verify that with Mary Beth Thompson to be sure, and I'll get right back with you.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, she's saying no, hold on.
And Councilmember Wharton, Mary Beth is listed as an attendee, if you'd like to move her to a panelist position.
Hey, Mary Beth. Are you there? Let's see, hold on. Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So 4.5 million is half of a bi-weekly payroll. Our payroll for the city is about $10 million per pay period.
Councilmember, does that answer your questions?
Yes, I just wanted to get a good sense of what 2 million would pay for, and I know it wouldn't pay, we wouldn't need it for a full pay period because it's be spread out over time. I just wanted to get a sense of how big our payroll was, and I didn't know how big it was. So 10 million for a pay period is substantial, so thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Cindy Gus Jensen.
I'm here. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify for the council that the idea of setting aside the 2 million is so that the administration wasn't in a position of coming to you saying, we're guessing, but we might need $10 million or $11 million or whatever. They need, it's one of those balancing acts where they need flexibility so that as urgent things come up and as obligations that have already been committed to come due, they can go ahead and get those taken care of. But then in order to preserve your policy and budget, policy input and budget oversight, then we suggested the idea of setting the rest in holding account so that you can have the opportunity for input once everybody has more information. So at least it might be a 100-step process, but at least it's a 2-step process where to use for the things that you're generally aware of. But then you hold the rest of the money in a set-aside account, so to speak, so that you know that that's very likely going to be committed and more, but you are reserving your right as elected legislators to come back in and do your proper oversight of that.
Okay, let's see. I've got, Mary Beth, did you have another question? Your hand is still up.
No, let me take my hand down.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. Why is it that we're not requiring, or should we require, as part of this program, that the employers cover sick leave for employees?
Are we Mr. Chair, are we shifting to the EDLF discussion?
Oh, yes, I thought we were.
Okay.
Are we going to do that?
I apologize. I think I probably confused things by trying to distinguish them, so I probably made it worse. But I think, so I think Ben Collender can probably talk about any particulars there and any input you have on how that loan could be structured.
Great.
And Councilmember Wharton, Ben is listed as an attendee again. He got bumped out, came back in. So if you could.
Okay. Yeah, let me.
Could just check him to be a panelist. We'll test his audio again.
Okay. Okay, welcome, Ben. Let me just take you off mute. Can you hear us?
Are we good? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I made it through the technology process. I didn't kick myself off again.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you.
So your question was why not require employers to pay sick leave, correct? If I can, before I dive into that, I'd like to maybe just take a second to say, since Wednesday night, our staff has been going crazy, working around the clock to put together, everything from the loan program to outreach in the community to really understand real time what's going on. I mean, the team has just been tremendously great about this, as well as the council staff and the administration as a whole being responsive to all of this. And so we appreciate the council's flexibility on some of this. I know we're a little bit outside of the norm on how we've crafted this program and what it looks like. And so just appreciate the patience there. So the loan program as a whole, in that sort of outreach community feedback, we got some feedback from the Business Advisory Board as well. There are three main themes that we were advised to focus on. One is speed. Availability of resources now is a good chunk of what the business community is asking for. There will be other opportunities through SBA and other programs that will get funding out, but there's a gap between the administration of that and what we're doing. The second item is flexible terms. So, deferring payments for a period of time after the loan has been administered. We see anywhere from a 2-month horizon or even maybe less, or all the way to an 18-month horizon of the situation that's going on. So having some flexible terms somewhere in there, at least having a starting point on what that looks like, and then reviewing as we go along, is something that we're hearing from the business community. And then the other thing is low interest. Not making money on this as a municipality, but providing this as a public good with repayment terms that don't include interest. Those are the major themes that we're hearing back. In every requirement that we're tagging onto the loan, we're tempted to put a lot of things in there, and we really want to from our normal process side, but it takes that attention away from the business owner. What we're trying to do to accommodate for this, because it's something that's extremely important, is look at how do we maybe bring resources available to an employer, or have them sign a commitment letter. By getting these, commit to a bucket of items, not as a legal contract, but as something in writing that says I'm going to commit to these things. And it's not necessarily focused on paying paying somebody on sick leave, because there will be programs out there for that. But it's more focused on keeping the business afloat. And maybe if they have to temporarily have some unemployment of employees, they can go to DWS for some state funding for that situation, or through the SBA program or other programs, there may be some ability to fill that gap. So the gap we're really trying to fill with the loan program is speed and flexible terms to get some of the smaller businesses through this.
Okay. See, council members, any other questions? Councilmember Valdemoros.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. I know the government has been working literally around the clock, asking as many businesses out there as they can to see what the impact of these measures that we have to take for to prevent the virus. So I know the hard work they've been doing with the survey, just talking to businesses, making phone calls, getting as many perspectives as possible. I've been part of it as well, and there is, a sense of urgency as I hear businesses in my district, selling, $2,000 worth of products, in a day or so, to having sales of $100 in the last, 4 or 5 days. And so that has meant for a lot of them to become really creative in terms of now that the dine-in is banned, being creative with takeout and curbside pickup and deliveries. But that being creative has also meant that some of the businesses had to cut down the hours of some employees. But from what I hear is like most people stay employed as much as they can because they know they have rents to pay, families to feed. And so I guess some of the businesses that I've talked to are prepared maybe for the next week or so, but after that, that's when things are way tighter, and this is when these funds could really help them to get them through maybe another 2 weeks, or 3 weeks or so before they have to apply. To the SBA. So I'm excited for this proposal. Obviously, the faster we can do it, the better. But it's also we need to be prudent and also not panic. I think we're in a good position in the sense that we as a council and the administration can start helping the small business community. So those are my comments.
Okay. Let's see. Other questions? Councilmember Fowler.
Sorry, I forgot how to raise my hand. I mean, this hand I know how.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'm definitely in support of this. There was a little bit of talk about making the process simpler, but I reread, or at least what was sent out today, and I think it's as simple as we can get it while still being effective. And so I appreciate the administration for that. I know this is off the subject a little bit of this particular loan program, but I either emailed this or texted it to somebody over the last couple of days with all the COVID stuff, that our future events are wondering what's happening. I had somebody from the Utah Arts Festival contact me, as I'm sure we all have. They have people coming in from out of town and need to know if we are canceling things, like how long this ban is going to be. I know that we may still not know the answer to that, but if we could please maybe formulate some sort of message to our event community, because they already have their budgets, they've already, artists who make their living off of this, as well as we're talking about small businesses and people who are affected by this in ways that others of us may not be totally affected by it. This is their livelihood, and just being able to make plans for the future, I think, is important. So any information that we can provide as soon as possible, and I don't know if perhaps we look at extending these grants to programs like our events that are bringing artists in from out of state, even local artists that are relying on this. Something I'm just sort of throwing out there. The other thing was, hold please. Events and, again, sort of off. So I have two things that are, right, hold please. I think's happening. Hold. The mail is on the camera. So The other thing is, I texted this to Rachel the other day, but I was with a friend of mine who works for Poison Control, and I am hoping just to give a little shout out to Poison Control for all of the hard work that they have done. I know we've all been working, you all especially, our Department of Economic Development, our health departments, everybody's been working triple time, overtime, around the clock. But I wanted to just relate this to everyone as we're talking about this subject, that she mentioned to me that on a normal Friday, they take about 200 calls, and last Friday they took over 1,500 calls. The number that the county health department is putting out as like the COVID number is actually poison control. So that's who people are calling, is poison control. So they've brought in a lot of students and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of give a shout out, make people aware of that they've been working really hard there. And those are kind of my 2 comments on this. I know it's a little bit off of subject of the loan itself, but of course I support that, and then just kind of bringing in some of the other things that I've heard over the last couple of weeks. My hand is down.
Okay, great. Councilmember Valdemoros.
So, if nobody else has questions at the moment, can we have Ben go over the funding and the program so that the constituents that are watching can understand what's being proposed?
Yes, sorry, we should.
That's okay.
Yes, let's do that. Ben, do you want to walk us through it?
Sure, I'll walk you through it. And maybe to address a couple of the comments as well, you know, we have Living Traditions that's right on the border, right on the cusp of the 60-day regulations for the CDC. So we're feeling the events pinch quite a bit and trying to look through that. And so we'll definitely work with the administration on some guidance there, because we're feeling that. And as well, you know, I'll leave it there. Let's walk through the program, because there's plenty to that. But if we can start maybe with the survey, and at a high level, what we're seeing is, you know, it's the small businesses that are being impacted the hardest, and really in the range of 25 or 50 to 25 or less employees. So we really took that input in when we were looking at how we're catering this program. So hence a live editable document, because as the feedback comes in, we're constantly looking at that and adjusting. At the very at the top line requirements, what we're looking for are companies with 50 employees or less, and those who can demonstrate a financial hardship out of this. We are looking at the source of funding coming from the EDLF, but one consideration before council today will be, you know, whether we look towards something next week for this program, or whether we can get a straw poll to basically spend some of what is in EDLF now on a program that will look like what you have seen. So timing will be an important consideration, whether we start at the end of this week or go into next week. We're looking at having a review committee that's outlined with some community members, as well as community members so we'll have a review committee and an approval committee as well. We've asked a council member if they would be willing to contribute time to be on the review committee. And I will be a time dedication for sure, because we have no idea how many applications we're going to get in and have to prioritize. But we would like that participation and not to be done without some council input. We are looking for, you know, one of the key things that we're looking at as well is coming in a subordinate position, because we know that other loans will likely come in primary positions. And we want to make this as flexible as possible instead of having personal liabilities in a situation like this. Just general business liability is something that we're asking for in terms of requirement. The use of funds is really important. To go to the workforce point, the funding can only be used for 4 key categories. One is on working capital, one is on inventory, one is on business stabilization, and one is on marketing. What we did.
Sorry, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure, please.
I mean, business stabilization seems really broad. What are you intending with that?
Do we have Peter in the Council of Chambers?
Peter Makowski?
No? I can get back on that. Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. So actually, we were actually considering removing the business stabilization due to that very reason that it is a little bit broad and a little bit hard to define. I think after further comment from the community, the immediate needs really are the working capital, inventory, and marketing that we should be focusing on, especially since these loans are in smaller amounts. They're only going to go so far. We really see business stabilization as SBA's role when they actually roll out their full program, and thus this program being a bridge to that program. So we probably will not be playing a role in business stabilization just by nature of the program.
Okay. Yeah, I just worry that if it's so big that it could swallow all of the not approved things.
Right.
Because it seems like we have covered, like the other 3 categories are, pretty defined. So I would kind of be worried about whether or not people might try to shoehorn the not approved uses in there, or something else that we're not considering. That's just my feedback. So sorry, you can go ahead and continue your presentation.
It appears Ben may have dropped out again. I can't seem to unmute him. So we do have Mayor Mendenhall's hand raised.
Oh, okay.
Wait, I thought I heard it.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes, I'm here. I think I was fighting somebody over the mute button. We were both hitting it at the same time.
Okay.
Learning with this new technology thing, right? So if we're going to move on, I think we're pretty comfortable taking out business stabilization. I remember in some of our conversations, we left a general bucket so that we could clearly outline the non-approved, and then anything that we wanted to give that flexibility to business, but I hear what you're saying and we agree to sort of have that focus be a little more narrow. Just some of the items that we're talking about to not have approved, because we want to make sure we're strategic with these funds. We don't want people going out and buying land and buildings in an economic downturn with this funding that's meant to bridge gaps for small business. No new construction, tenant improvements. It's focused purely on addressing the issue at hand and not business opportunities outside of your normal business operation. So we've sort of outlined some other things as well. New machinery, right? Landscaping, those sorts of things really aren't being considered for this loan. Maybe I can pause there and see if we have any questions to that point before I walk through the remaining items, because I know that's a pretty serious consideration in that bucket.
Sorry.
So the loan amounts we're talking about are $20,000 as a maximum. So they'll be based on need and reviewed by a committee. So that may come in lower for certain businesses. So one message that we want to be clear on is we're not this is a drop in the bucket. We shouldn't be marketing that this is going to solve the problem. We're just doing what we can out of the gate as a first run to see, get something out there for the business community. Because if we do full funding for every application, that's only 50 applications. So just one thing to consider. But what we will get back from this is the review committee will identify those most critical needs up front and be able to help, stabilize some of those most critical needs. We're looking at doing it with 2 rounds of funding. So, and this is, I think, regardless of timing, we would do 2 rounds of funding of $500,000, just because the sense is that what we don't want to do is burn through all of it at once. And there's this tension that we're having between, we need to be fast, but we need to make sure people get information. So we didn't want to just push it all out in one round, then it's gone, then somebody found out about the opportunity the next day. We wanted to give another window for businesses to be able to be aware of the opportunity if they weren't before, and then come in and participate. Taking our survey is, not only are we going to have this online, we're going to push it to our entire Salesforce database, but we're also going to push this out to all of the businesses who have taken the survey so that they'll have this right away. So, most of the other pieces in here are pretty straightforward loan application process, which I've talked about with the committee. We're still working with finance on what the timeline is for that back-end processing, but hoping to have a very short time frame for turnaround as well. And loan evaluation criteria as well. So maybe I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'm calling on myself. So why are they going through 2 rounds? That seems kind of odd. Like if we're trying to be expeditious.
So we wouldn't do 2 rounds in terms of, if you're a business, you can apply twice. I think the intent is we're trying to balance speed with awareness, because certain businesses, if you, let's say we launch the fund tomorrow, close applications the next day, and then businesses are like, I had no idea that funding was available. Yeah. We think we're going to get far more demand than supply regardless.
Yeah.
Opening it up into 2 rounds at least sort of answers, in one way, answers the time, issue on time that we're hearing, with also having some time to actually get attention to those businesses of the program.
And how will the committee that's deciding, what will be the criteria for them to decide what business is deserving this?
The criteria that we have outlined below. So we have 3 sets of criteria which the loan committee will be evaluating. First is the financial information. Second, in terms of past and current financial obligations, business financial history, demonstration of financial loss due to the disaster, workforce impact, those sorts of things. The second is in terms of priority of industry and what the impact is. So that's largely going to be guided by what our survey results are and what we're seeing there. And finally, 25% of the loans, we know we always are looking at, how do we pay attention geographically to the city? And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but what we have is sort of maybe slightly more than a balanced approach to the west side in terms of percent that should be distributed to the west side versus what will be captured downtown for some of these businesses, just to make sure we leave room for equity across the city for how these loans are distributed.
Okay.
When we say west side, we mean west of I-15 for clarity.
Right. So so this doesn't make a distinction between for-profit and non-profits, right?
It intentionally does not.
So what about, okay, because I've gotten a lot of feedback from constituents and residents talking about what a blow it's going to be to the arts and entertainment industry. So all of the, like a theater company or something like that, they could also apply for this too, right?
That's right, and that's why we intentionally, left that to where that wasn't an evaluation criteria, and we're looking more at, loss of revenue and finances as a primary objective. I think those sorts of organizations will benefit from this. And also keeping in mind and being sensitive of the fact that we have the Arts Council within economic development, and it is a strategic part of our economy that we want to make sure is considered in this process.
Okay, do we foresee any issues with, if it is a nonprofit, let's say, what if it's an advocacy organization that maybe doesn't align with what the city's goals are or something?
I don't think we currently consider that the loan evaluation criteria, but we would be welcome to any feedback on how we could capture that.
Well, I'm wondering if we can, or I think we can, but I think we might want to ask the city attorney's office just to make sure that it doesn't raise some kind of First Amendment issue or something. I mean, it's not First Amendment because we're not censoring anyone, but something like that. Oh, is Katie there?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Katie Lewis is here. Could you repeat the question for her just because it's a little hard to hear from back in the audience there?
Yeah, I was wondering, what if a group that's like an advocacy organization wants to use this money, and it's a group that advocates or their message or whatever is not really something that the city would want to prioritize. Are we going to get is there a way that the city could get into trouble if we were like, well, that sort of the mission of this organization doesn't really align with what we want to do, and so we're going to elect to get somebody else? Are we in a position where we can do that legally?
So I think that your best option is to allow whoever wants to apply and figure out what exactly they want to use the money for. So the program has already limited the uses to working capital, inventory. You've talked about business stabilization and marketing. You don't want to be in a position to restrict any entity's First Amendment rights, but you certainly can review to understand what exactly an entity is using the money for and ensure that it's, being fairly applied and used. So I think my response to you is, let's take it on a case-by-case basis and see who applies and see what people are wanting to use the resources for.
Sure, okay.
Nice to see everyone.
Yes, good to see you. Okay, council members, other questions? I see Mayor Mendenhall's hand is raised.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Thank you. I raised my hand a really long time ago, so I wanted to say a couple of things from like 25 minutes ago that probably seem irrelevant now. But to Amy's point about kind of farther off events that our people, organizers are wanting to know about, we heard that question yesterday, and I think that Lorna's team is starting on some language already that we would be happy to collaborate with to get some consistent messaging out from both ends of the hall to the public about just the ambiguity of what we're dealing with and how to stay in touch with us and all of that. So know that that is in process. Ben's point about the small business focus of what we're trying to do, I don't know if you had the chance to see the results from the survey so far, but I'm having a hard time articulating how it's characterized. Ben, maybe you can help me out, but the businesses who are most affected by far are the businesses with 25 or fewer employees. And it was like 90% were the absolutely most impacted were the tiniest businesses. And that was after, I think we've had over 400 businesses so far reply to our survey. So and we're going to keep soliciting that feedback. But I think I get the ambiguity or the vagueness of the, sorry, what was the language that we were talking about? The
Business stabilization.
stability.
Yeah.
Business stabilization. But I'm curious maybe to get feedback from the Business Advisory Board about how would they articulate what that means. And hang on, baby girl. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I lost my train of thought. Anyway, the Business Advisory Board's been working with economic development almost every day. And I think before we just slash that piece of support from the potential loans or grants, we should check in with the Business Advisory Board.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That's just the part that gives me the most concern. I don't want people to get too creative in what they might come up with and have us funding things that maybe we wouldn't consider as essential.
And one consideration is that you also have a review committee who can dismiss applications based off of their definition of business stabilization. But to the mayor's point, I'm happy to reach out to, I don't know, depending on how we go today, it may be difficult to convene the entire BAB, but I may be able to give Curtis, the chair, a call and see if he can help me with some feedback with particular members.
Mr. Chair, I forgot one more piece I wanted to mention.
Yes.
To that prioritization or being able to choose one application over another that are otherwise similar, but for the purpose or the intent of the organization. I wonder, maybe Ben, you have an idea if there's some of those criteria in the EDLF already or in some other grant fund or loan distribution fund that we could utilize for these purposes, so that people applying know that it's not just first come, first serve, but that we're looking at X, Y, and Z criteria or priorities in the applications.
Right, we can definitely take a look at that.
Okay, council members, any other follow-up questions there? Okay, seeing, Councilmember Valdemoros?
Other things that, okay, so, sorry, I'm putting my two things that I wanted to say. One, for the restaurant businesses, me, myself being one of them, we just received the official confirmation from the county that there's no dine-in allowed, but we didn't know exactly how long that was going to happen. So far that's till April 15th. So the ban on dine-in is until April 15th. Takeout and deliveries, it's fine, and curbside pickup for food is fine. So that puts it at a month for the restaurant industry, at a month of lower sales. So that's something that we need to consider as well. And then I think, and I'm not sure, Ben, how much how much more we can talk about deferral of payments and deferral of rent for some of those commercial properties. I'm not sure if the Economic Development Department has a plan to ask for some collaboration from the landlord as we struggle for the next 4 months.
Thank you. It's a great question and something we've definitely been thinking about. One of the things that we've been messaging internally and to some of our close partners is that, we think like a community, right, in these types of situations. And I don't think anybody wants to see a property owner take advantage of a small business and because they missed a payment because of this situation. But there are certain limitations that we have as a city to come in on that. A lot of, and maybe the mayor can speak to this, a lot of our communications that I've seen is really asking us to think like a community, and that's great. I imagine we'll see someone really step up in the community as a great example of somebody who's working great with businesses, and that's something that we'd love to champion. We know there are examples out there, and we'd love to hear them.
May I make a comment? Or a call out to our community? Exactly that. As council members, we're trying to do as much as we can and working with administration and as fast as we can and with the resources that we have. But we do ask the collaboration from the landlords to help, especially the smaller businesses that might not be able to cover rent the next few months, without any additional help from the city or from SBA or from the state. So this is my call out to the community to think about all these things that we're going through together and to try to be more a little bit flexible and collaborate and help us as we're trying to help as many and out there.
Okay.
So,
yeah, go ahead and respond.
Yeah, absolutely great and concurrently appreciate that sort of sentiment, Councilmember Valdemar. So one of the things, and we haven't gotten to this yet, but one of the things we're balancing in economic development is the timeline to look at this loan. And we know there are sensitivities of process that we have to be thinking about, that we're fully aware of. As I see it, and maybe this is up for council staff to break this down in council members in more detail, or I can do my best at it. But there are really two options to consider, and doing a straw poll for now, for instance, to say we would support you looking at the EDLF for the funding of this, or really looking at allocating a budget next week as well, and having the program fully prepped and ready to administer. And I think we're talking about a delay of 3 to 5 days. And is it the cost benefit of, is it better to have a little more planning and certainty before we administer this, or do we feel that time is of the essence for administering this loan program?
So, did you want, I'm trying to keep track of some straw poll questions here. Do you want to pull that question, Ben, right now?
I think that would be great. And we're also tracking a straw poll question independently of that one, but related, as it's an EDLF question, of deferring loan payments for 90 days, all businesses who have EDLF loans. So perhaps maybe two separate straw polls, but related.
Okay. Amy, was that a hand? No? Okay. So I was going to ask, Ben, do you want to restate the first question that you asked?
Yeah, so the question would be a straw poll to allow the administration to start working on this program now and with existing EDL funds.
Right, okay.
And the funds would, provided as the COVID funds, would replenish the EDLF.
Okay. I do want to ask that straw poll, but I see Cindy Gus Jensen's hand is up, so I'm going to call on her and then I'll restate the poll. Go ahead, Cindy.
Hey, Rachel and I have been communicating here, and I think we might have a way to figure this out. And I think we might all be saying the same thing, but just using slightly different wording. But if the council really, well, I know the council does really want to do this and really want to expedite. One way you could do it is to go ahead today with a straw poll, two parts than what Ben was suggesting. One part, but close. One part urging the administration to go ahead with all of the planning and even the acceptance of the applications and underwriting, those sorts of things, but all of that contingent on an appropriation which could take place in the budget opening that you're going to be advertising for the 24th. So they could get everything all ready and processed, and then the people who are authorized and approved could receive their money on Wednesday morning if the administration were ready for that. That would allow the legislative branch to have time to really ask any additional questions and go ahead and hold the public hearing on this on the 24th, so that we're not getting so far ahead that the money would go out before the hearing is held. So then the second part of the straw poll would be the indicating your intention at some later date to change the Economic Development Loan Fund so that you can consider, or so the administration can use the loan fund in this way. And I think that, I could be mistaken, but I think that we weren't quite ready to have that resolution on the 24th. So anyway, if your intention, if you're okay with that, you could have that second straw poll. The third straw poll of extending the payments, I think you could do that too, but probably we would need to have something on the next agenda confirming that. And it may be entirely within the administration's authority to do that anyway, but just in terms of transparency. So anyway, there are two different things you could do. One is go ahead tonight and approve the use of the EDLF loan fund, Economic Development Loan Fund, right now, and possibly get the money out as soon as Friday if the administration is able to get applications, approve applications, and process it that quickly, or do all of that and then get the hearing under your belts and some additional public exposure, and then make it subject to the council finalizing it on next Tuesday. So I hope we confuse things worse.
Okay, so just keeping track of what we've got here. I've got, hold on just a second. So do we want, so first question would be, does the council want to use current EDLF funds to get this to have this program start as soon as Friday? Or would we rather have the hearing on our next meeting and have them have the administration do all of the legwork to have it set up, and have reviewed some applicants and be ready to disperse the money on Wednesday? So I'm not really sure how to have that as a straw poll, because it's an either or question. So, but I would like to hear from council members how they feel about one or the other. So does anybody want to weigh in? Yeah, not everybody at once. Yeah. Anna, what do you think?
This means I'm thinking. I just wanted to.
Oh, I thought you were.
But it's okay. But I did. So then application would have been submitted already, and the money would be dispersed on Wednesday. The funds as soon as next Wednesday. That's one, right? That's one option. And the Friday option is this Friday, 4 days. So can you repeat that, Cindy, please? I'm sorry, I missed that one.
It would just be using current EDLF funds.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure. Maybe Ben from the surveys that we have received, was there a question of, was there such a question of doing it now within 2 days, or no, we can wait for 5 days? I mean, was there anything like that that gives us some sort of indication?
That would be more from the qualitative side in our conversations. It wasn't a specific question we asked in the survey. We started the surveys on Thursday, which seems like months ago. And at that point, we didn't have any sense of that it was going to be that urgent. And I think that has picked up over time since Thursday.
Yeah. I see. Oh, sorry, who was that? Okay. I see Councilmember Valdemore's cat has joined us. I just want to recognize him or her. Sorry, David Dugan.
Alexander Kiriton, everybody.
Oh, Alexander. It's appropriate that he would weigh in on this important financial part. So. Okay, Dan.
So I like the speed. We need to expedite and go fast. But I think if we try Friday, we're gonna get overwhelmed, and we may not be actually providing funds to the right source. So if we gave them time to get the loan applications, review them, process them, think about them, prioritize them, and then we, by Tuesday or by Wednesday of next week, we can cut some checks. And I think that will give us the time to do it in a expeditious manner, but also in a more of a systematic manner, because companies are going to have to also provide the loan application stuff, and that in itself is going to take a little time. So I'm more of in favor of doing all the legwork, but then cutting the checks on the Wednesday.
Okay, Cindy Guest Jensen.
I'm sorry, I don't have anything to add. I don't know if Rachel might have anything.
Oh, well, your hand is still up, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
James Rogers.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is amazing. So I agree. I like speed, but I still feel like I know that it's a rush to get it done, but I feel like we could be a little bit more little bit more stewardly in how we get it done. I think waiting until next week to get it, writing the checks is probably the best way to do it. I agree with Councilmember Dugan on that, so.
Okay, and let's see where, Councilmember Johnston.
Can you hear me? No?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I missed most of that. Is there a downside to shifting the funds from the loan just for this week so it's available?
If you're okay with me chiming in, Council Chair Warden, I think the most critical thing for us at this phase is more or less, if we're going to put out applications, to have them ready to review, we'll need sign off on the program. So that we can inform the community they're applying for. And even getting that sign off, I think, would be the most critical thing, because in the back end operations, we haven't confirmed with finance that can happen in that short of a time frame yet. But we would need to move forward at least with the loan program sign off so that we could set up our infrastructure to actually get applications out there and have some time to review with the committee prior to the allocation being made.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anybody opposed to that. I'm not hearing any opposition to that.
So I think we can be flexible if we could at least get approval on the loan program itself.
That was where I was. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
If it's no skin off our back, whether the money comes out of that fund temporarily until we approve the other funding next week, I think it sends a good signal. I think that also it obviously should be contingent on the loan plan being vetted as well. Just because the money's allocated doesn't mean you have to put it out there immediately. It sends a good message, I think. So I'm not opposed to doing it right now. I understand.
Okay. Amy Fowler, Councilmember Fowler. Oh, hold on. Yes.
Okay. I think after just listening to Ben, if the first question is simply, do we approve the loan program, then I would feel really comfortable just doing a straw poll thumbs up right now today. If we need to come back for some of the details, if there are sort of other things, I think what I'm hearing is we need to give administration some direction. Is this something that we are going to eventually, like, all heads forward and we're all going to be supportive of this, and then the details can come back to us? That seems to be a little bit of what I'm hearing. So I would feel very comfortable in proposing a straw poll that the loan program, as it has been provided to us at this time, I guess that if we are in support of the loan program as it has been provided to us at this time, I guess that would be my straw poll.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead. Yeah, I think that'll be the poll. And since we're all, so I can't see, can I see everyone? Okay, yes, I can see everyone. So that's the poll. Does anybody have any questions?
Sorry, for recording purpose, the recorder's purposes, Councilmember, do you mind just roll calling it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilmember, sorry, one clarification. We do have some outstanding questions to answer for council on the loan program that you've asked us to look into, like matching the EDLF language for nonprofits, perhaps. So it may change slightly, but in its essence, it will remain the same.
Okay.
And I don't know if I'm still on, but I think, Ben, I appreciate that. I think for right now, my straw poll is very broad of that we support this loan program for small businesses, we may need some questions answered as you mentioned, Ben, or may need a little bit more detail, but I think that can come back to us if need be. I think for me personally, I want you and your staff to feel comfortable going forward in answering these questions and going forward in creating the actual outline of the program so we can get these monies out there.
Yeah, so again, the straw poll will just be like, are you in favor in concept of this form, or of the form of this program, understanding there may be slight adjustments, and then I'm gonna ask for a second straw poll after that. So that's the first one. Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson is a yes. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Okay, second straw poll is, we would ask the administration or our council members in favor of asking the administration to start rolling out advertising the program, accepting applications, basically doing everything except cutting checks. And then we would look at having a hearing at the next meeting where we may choose to allocate more funds to this, but not having checks actually go out until Wednesday morning at the earliest. Councilmember, I'll roll call that as well. Councilmember Johnston.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler. I think, was that a yes, Councilmember Fowler?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
Councilmember, where'd you go, Darren? There you are. Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.
Yes.
Okay, third straw poll that Ben was asking for is, do we want to give current EDLF borrowers a 90-day extension? Does anybody want to speak to that before we ask for a straw poll there? Or is this something we need to straw poll?
We've had, Council Chair, we've had some discussions and we understand, I don't know if we've gotten this confirmed, but we understand it to be purely administrative, but we would feel more comfortable moving forward with that if we do have council support.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's why I asked. I wasn't sure if you even needed a straw poll, but we're happy to take one. So, does anybody want to speak to this one way or the other? I don't know if you're holding your fingers up because you want to speak or because you want to vote yes.
Thumbs up.
Okay, so so nobody wants to speak to it. I'm going to go ahead and call the roll or the vote. Councilmember Johnston?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler? Councilmember Fowler?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Valdemoros?
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
Councilmember Mono? Sorry, I gotta get.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes as well. Okay. I think we can now move on to our next agenda item. Alright, I'm just getting back to that screen. Okay. The next item that I have is budget amendment number 5, which was formerly item number 6. So who from Rachel, do you want to take it away?
Council Chair, Ben Ludke has an introduction on this issue, and then Jennifer has some stuff to add, if that's all right with you.
Oh, Sure, yeah. So,
Okay,
Ben, go
Ben.
ahead.
No, Ben.
I can't hear Ben.
All right, Ben, we'll need to troubleshoot you.
Maybe I'll say my part while Ben's working on getting the microphone connected. My part was just to sort of clarify some of the stuff we talked about earlier, which was that there are quite a few items related to the city's response to the coronavirus that are going to be included in Budget Amendment number 4, which is a little misleading because it's coming after Budget Amendment number 5. So we're dealing with Budget Amendment number 5 tonight. Setting the hearing date for next Tuesday will include the EDLF sort of technical aspect in that decision. And then next Tuesday, we'll also talk about Budget Amendment number 4, where there's a whole bunch of different items that are related to this, the coronavirus issue and other budget amendment items. And then that will have its own hearing on April 7th, where you guys can take action then. So that's all I had to add. I don't know if Ben, if his microphone's working yet. Let's set that. Okay.
He's calling in. He'll be unmuted shortly.
Okay. Great.
Can anyone hear me now?
Yes.
Now we can. Yay.
All right. So there's only one item in Budget Amendment number 5 that was transmitted. As Jennifer just said, we will be adding the $1 million for the Economic Development Loan Fund as a council added item for the public hearing and potential vote next Tuesday. The one item in Budget Amendment number 5 that was transmitted is additional funding for a property purchase. The council in Budget Amendment number 1 earlier this fiscal year approved $4 million for this property purchase. It was using $3 million of parks impact fees and $1 million of stormwater funds from public utilities. The city's offer was not selected. The offer that was selected was later withdrawn. A property appraisal came in at just under $7 million. The administration is proposing an additional $3.5 million of parks impact fees. The new total funding would be $7.5 million. If the council approved this, there would still be $948,000 in parks impact fees available for future projects. And the administration sent a signed letter of intent to
Ben, I'm sorry. We're going to interrupt you for just a moment. We have an attorney consultation just for one quick second. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, why don't you just briefly say what we can and can't really talk about?
Hi there. Given that the city's acquisition of this piece of property, there still may be some aspects of it that aren't public. We may not want to have a lot of detail about where we are and instead discuss generally what the numbers are and whether or not the council is prepared to appropriate that funding.
Thank you. So then, knowing that, do you have anything that you feel you need to add?
That was the last thing to add. Everything was in the transmittal that we received.
Okay, great, thank you. Council members, is there any questions or any discussion on this item? Otherwise, I'll just call for a straw poll. Councilmember Rogers, did you have a question, or were you just getting really excited to vote?
I'm getting prepped for that straw poll, man.
All right, coming at you. So, Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston.
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Mono.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
And Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.
Council Chair, can I clarify one thing about your straw poll?
Whoops, yes.
Hi. So the council right now is planning on holding a public hearing and adopting the budget amendment on the 24th. Is the straw poll tonight an indication to the administration that they can proceed with executing a purchase agreement prior to the budget amendment? Or is it just an indication that as of next week, everybody agrees that it'll probably be approved? Just trying to figure out what the next step is here.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, yes, Jennifer Bruno.
If I could chime in, I don't think that we anticipated you guys taking a straw poll on this one. Maybe we're just in the habit of doing that because that was a cool thing to do today. And I don't think it hurts necessarily, but I think to Katie Lewis's point, I don't think you guys need to decide anything tonight. You can hold the hearing and decide after the hearing. That would be more standard council procedure unless the administration needs to do something before the public hearing.
Well, I intended it just as like a, yes, we're still all on the same page, ready to keep going. I think we probably still need to have the hearing before we authorize anything like executing anything. That's what I intended. If people want to go further, they can propose a second straw poll. And Ben, did you have something you wanted to add? No, okay. Council members, did you want to add anything to the straw poll that was just taken? Or I guess, do you want to propose a second straw poll or we're satisfied? I don't see anybody's hand up except for Cindy Gustafson's.
And I have something to follow up on after this.
Oh, okay. Okay, so nothing on that item. So, hey, Cindy, then go ahead and with what you wanted to follow up on.
Separate from this, the administration would like to have clarification. You probably don't need a straw poll on the $2 million that would be available for all of the expenses that are being incurred that are related to the pandemic. So it's pretty much a given, I think, that there are expenses that the city is incurring right now, and your first opportunity to have a hearing and vote on that is next Tuesday. So is what I just said in keeping with where the council's coming from, that are you okay understanding that they do have expenses just by existing as a city? There are expenses that are adding up.
Yes. Let's see. So you think, do you want to straw poll this then?
You can. I think it's probably not necessary. It's pretty logical that if we've had to put somebody out on leave, then that's an expense to the city. We know we have to pay for it one way or another. And next week you'll have the opportunity to specify that you intend to allocate X number of dollars to that purpose.
Okay.
Either way.
Okay. I don't know that we need to have a straw poll. Does anybody raise your hand if you feel really strongly that this needs to be straw polled, or if you're satisfied with the information that was just given? Okay, thank you. So now let's move on to item number 5, which is our electronic meeting policy discussion. This was formerly item number 9. And let's see, who do I have who's going to present on that?
Cindy Lou.
It's me.
Lou?
Hi. We just like to have audio fun. All right, is that better?
Yep.
Thank you. Mine is just a quick policy manual update to reference the electronic meeting, which is what we're conducting for our first time today, policy. We do need to update the policy and reference state code appropriately and city code. We have noticed that there's a conflict with the frequency required, and so checking in with the council on approach to that. We just thought it might be suitable to refer to the state code and leave that as the baseline, and then further identify needs within our policy and processes.
Okay.
Cindy, looks like she may have her hand raised. Cindy Gus-Jensen, Councilmember Wharton. I don't have much else to say to that.
I'm apparently really bad at putting my hand down. I'll do that now.
All right.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add or say about this amending our policy? I don't know how to interpret it. Councilmember Fowler.
Okay, Councilmember Fowler. You have your hand raised. Yeah.
Yes. Is there a way to have this during all of the summer months so we can sit outside during council meetings on a beach, perhaps? I mean, maybe I'm just throwing that out there.
Be careful what you wish for, I would say.
Away from the coronavirus.
Does anybody else have any questions or anything? Okay. Do we?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
One of our clarifications was just with reference to like the emergency. When there isn't an emergency declaration, the council can meet with electronic means, but needs to have a quorum present in the building. A majority of a quorum. Thank you, Katie. So that will be updated within our policy, and then the reference to the state and city code.
Okay.
I don't know if we anticipated a straw poll or just a nod, and
No,
we'll
because we
keep
need to bring
moving
you more
forward.
information.
Yeah, we'll be bringing you a red line of the policy.
Okay, perfect.
And it may include some ordinance amendments as well.
Okay. So we have then the last item on our agenda for tonight, which is informational separation of powers in the mayor council form of government. That was formerly item number 8.
Do you want a minute before your item?
Is I believe City Attorney Katie Lewis is going to lead us in this discussion.
Yes, just one moment while we transfer some audio, and she'll be live.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I was asked to speak to you today about separation of powers in city government, just generally, and then also discuss how that flows down to the other sort of related entities in city government that you all serve as the board of directors or the leadership on. So I'll start with an introduction, but please, if you have questions, raise your hand, and Chris will help me identify those hands.
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. So as a general overview, Salt Lake City is a council mayor form of government. And what that means is that the mayor's authority is executive and the council's authority is legislative. And you'll often hear us use sort of shorthand for that as administrative and / executive and policymaking / budget. Those are sort of the two worlds. You will find in your materials a chart that we have created that we really view as sort of a living document as separation of powers come up. And I'll tell you that those are some of the most challenging discussions that we have. And I thought I would start by sharing a quote from a court in New Jersey about separation of powers. And what it says is that a rigid and inflexible classification of the branches of government into mutually exclusive, watertight compartments would render government unworkable. Inevitably, some osmosis occurs when the branches touch one another. The powers of one branch sometimes take on the hue and characteristics of the other. So courts across the country really struggle with how to identify the separate authorities of the separate branches, and we've done our best with the chart that I provided and is in your packet. I'm happy to go through the list of the items. I'd like to touch on a couple. The first is, right off the bat, that the legislative authority, one of the main ones, is adopting ordinances and resolutions, which is essentially city laws. Those can be both internal and external rules and ordinances, but they're really the policy guidance for the city. The mayor has the authority to issue administrative rules and regulations to outline administrative procedures if they're not in conflict with applicable laws. And I think a perfect example of that is where we are right now with our proclamation of local emergency. So the mayor issued that pursuant to her local emergency powers that flow from city code. The city council establish a process by which the mayor can exercise emergency authority. She has that authority for 30 days, and then the council must authorize an extension of that by resolution. There's that sort of back and forth between the two branches. The mayor has also, pursuant to her administrative authority, issued executive orders. Those are what we would view as the internal-facing direction for city administrative staff. That includes some paid administrative leave and also some discussions about how city employees will conduct themselves during this local emergency. So that's sort of a real-time example of the two branches and how they work together as to laws and ordinances. The second one is the executive has the authority to administer and exercise control of all city departments. And on the other sort of side of the chart, the city council has the authority to review and monitor and obtain information on how that administration is occurring. We have a case that says that the council is entitled to receive administrative records and may adopt a reasonable policy or ordinance on how to obtain that information. You all, throughout this past year, and I think coming up, are working on those ordinances in order to obtain information and reports. And what we will consistently say is that flow of information is very important between the branches so they can both do their jobs. It can't be a situation where either branch is stopping the work of the other by the amount of information that is being requested or asked to be compiled. So if it's like every week you have to come up with a 5,000-page report about everything you've done, that starts to feel like an encroachment on one of the branches. So again, that's that sort of the friendly tension, I would say, between the branches. You'll see that both branches have the authority to hire their own staff, and that the city council also has the authority to create rules and responsibilities and compensation for city appointments and staff. So that's a big part of what you do in your budget, is the comp plan and the types of positions that the city has. Some of those employees, of course, are appointed. Again, this is the balance between the branches. The mayor appoints certain positions, and the city council offers its advice and consent before those positions can be filled. Some positions are statutory positions, which means that the mayor must appoint them. Others, the mayor could leave vacant, but if she does appoint an acting director, the city council has enacted an ordinance that limits that acting position to 4 months unless the council consents to longer period of time. So again, that's that balance between making sure the administration operates and making sure that the council offers its advice and consent on the appropriate positions. The council also has the authority to offer advice and consent for all boards and commissions, and the mayor appoints the citizens to those boards and commissions. We also have, in our separation of powers or strong mayor form of government, the city attorney represents both branches of government. Both branches have equal and independent access to our office. Yeah, right. Thank you, Councilmember Fowler. Thumbs up. Right, I know, it's great. What that means is that we offer our advice in a privileged setting to both branches. The council does that through, oftentimes if you want to meet together, through calling a closed session and receiving information about pending or reasonably imminent litigation. The mayor has the authority to direct litigation. So again, that's that balance between receipt of information and giving opinions to the mayor, and the mayor ultimately making those litigation decisions. Another big area where we have conversations about separation of powers or the strong mayor, the council mayor form of government, is in the purchase or sale of real property. Utah law provides that the council can provide for the manner in which city property is bought and sold. The council has done that for the city for the sale of certain types of real property. That's City Code 2.58 and City Code 2.90. 2.90 has to do with open space. 2.58 has to do with significant parcels of real property. That's the manner in which property is sold. The mayor has the authority to decide specifically which pieces of property are sold. The council does not direct specific sales of specific pieces of property. Likewise, the council exercises its policy advice and policy considerations for the acquisition of real property through the budget. The council has not adopted an ordinance about the acquisition of real property right now. The mayor has the authority to actually execute that contract and purchase a particular piece of property pending the city's budget approval on that. There are lots of back and forth in terms of zoning, subdivision, vacating streets. If you have specific questions about that, we can go into it. The next big one is the budget. The mayor has the authority to prepare and submit the budget to the city council, and the city council adopts the budget and appropriates funds. That's all done through ordinance, which the council adopts an ordinance. The mayor has the authority to veto the ordinance. On budgets, it's a line item veto, and the council has the authority to override those vetoes or those line item vetoes with a supermajority. We saw that last year, where the council overrode some of Mayor Biskupski's budget vetoes. So that was an example of that back and forth between the budget and how the veto authority works. Finally, unless you have questions, I'm just sort of going through all of them, but finally, the council has the authority to appropriate funds for certain purposes, and as part of that appropriation, put conditions or set policy direction on how those funds will be spent. The mayor has the authority to execute contracts, which is how those funds typically are spent, and the mayor has the authority for that specific contract. That's strong mayor form of government in the city 101. My next step was to go through the other related entities, the RDA, the library, and the local building authority, unless you have specific questions about the city in particular.
Council members, any questions? I'm just looking to see, I don't see any hands up. So, Katie, do you want to continue on?
Absolutely, no problem. So the RDA is a separate body corporate and politic that is created by the city council, and it's created to undertake or promote project area development, and the RDA's geographic boundaries are the same as the city's. So if we unpack that a little bit, Utah Code 17C allows any city to create a redevelopment agency by ordinance, and the city council can also dissolve that RDA by ordinance. Now, of course, if there's any contractual obligations or bonds, the RDA can't be dissolved, but it is created by you all sitting in your seats as elected officials on the city council. 17C also provides that the city council are the board of directors for the redevelopment agency, and the mayor is the executive director. So you all have that position on the RDA by virtue of your election as mayor in Mayor Mendenhall's case, and city council members for the 7 of you city council members. It goes without saying, but an individual could not be a member of the RDA's board of directors or could not be the RDA's executive director without first being an elected official in the city. Utah Code 17C creates an overlay where the RDA is subject to the same separation of powers model that the city is, with the mayor exercising administrative authority and the RDA board exercising legislative authority. The RDA, because it is connected to the city and is created by the city to undertake specific projects it can only do certain things under Utah Code 17C. City employees are RDA staff. They are exactly the same as me or any other city employee, but they do RDA work. And they get the same city benefits and utilize the same internal services as any other city employee. So we advise the RDA the same way we advise the Department of Public Utilities or any other group in the city. The director of the RDA is a department director who is appointed by the mayor with advice and consent of the council. So again, that individual is a city employee appointed with the same advice and consent as any other department director. In terms of the chart that I have created, you'll see that really the same things that I just discussed for the city overlay of executive and legislative authorities is the same in the RDA. It's that same balance between the policy and the budget and legislative and the executive and administrative for the mayor and the administrative staff. Are there any specific questions about the RDA? Or I can go on to the library and the local building authority.
Council members, I don't see any questions, so go ahead and keep going. Thank you.
I sure will, thanks. So the library is a little bit different. The library is a separate legal entity, and it's governed by a state law that says that the mayor appoints the library board of directors. And, well, first of all, the city council has to establish the library board of directors as a board. So you do that by ordinance, just like you would with, any other board, any other city board. At that point, then, the mayor appoints the members of the library board, and they're subject to the city council's advice and consent, just like any other board. But the library's executive director is a library employee, and all other people who work at the library are library employees. They are not city employees. So it is a different model than the RDA, and that is because state code creates it in a different way. So the library is connected to the city both through its board and also because the city approves its budget. The city also sets the library's tax levy. So you have a budgetary authority. Oh, Councilmember Fowler.
Is this similar to how the airport budget works as well?
It is not directly similar to the airport. Sure. The airport has an advisory board that weighs in on the airport's budget, but the airport employees are city employees, and the airport director is a department director of the city. It's an enterprise fund, but I would say it's analogy. It's a little bit like the RDA in that it's an enterprise fund, but it also is part of the city and is not a separate legal entity in the way that the RDA is.
I think I'm asking this because I've always just sort of thought of the library as us not really being able to do a ton with it because of the difference between being a city employee and kind of being its own separate entity. And so, you know, this is my third time going through some of the separation of power stuff, and it still always surprises me on, like, oh, wait, we can or cannot do these things with, you know, all of these other entities. So, Jen.
Sorry, I can just add, one of the ways that I've found that's helpful is who are the employees? Are they city employees or are they library employees? And in the airport's case, they're all city employees. They're on the staffing document of the city. They have the same benefits as the city, PEHP, you know, healthcare, all that stuff. The library actually has their own compensation plan that's separate from the city's compensation plan. It tends to be similar to the cities because obviously it's kind of weird if they have something that's different, that's very different than ours. But there have been cases in the past where their health insurance has been entirely different from the cities. So I don't know if that helps.
It does help, but so that is state statute mandated.
That's
the
right.
library. The way that the library works is state statute mandated, yet funded by the city.
Funded by the taxpayers in the city. So yes.
Oh yes. Okay.
So
Okay,
Katie,
that helps.
oh, sorry. So Katie, all city library systems are set up the same in that regard?
So the city library system is all governed by the City Library Board of Directors and the library executive director, who is not a city employee.
Right, but I mean, is that unique to Salt Lake, or are all cities like that?
It is, all cities are like that. All cities have the authority to create their own library. Now, remember, we still have the separation of powers overlay for everything the council and the mayor does. So some things about the library board or the budget might be a little bit different, but the concept of a library board and then separate library employees is the same for all cities.
And if they are their own taxing entity, why do we approve their budget?
I wish I could answer that, except for to say that it's a state law aspect of how libraries are created.
Okay, have there ever been any times when a city council has denied or not approved the library board's budget, and what happens when that happens?
I'm looking at Jen and Cindy.
Cindy probably knows.
Cindy?
Okay, a couple of things. Katie, check me on this first one, please. I think that the city has the choice of having the library board or the library as a city department or as a separate legal entity that's a taxing authority with their own board. The library board is different than most city boards in that it's a governing board, a policy-making board. Is that right, Katie? Is that still a possibility in state law? I know that decision was made early on by the city.
Yeah. I don't want to speak out of term, so I'd like to double check that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So anyway, but it is separate, but the taxing authority belongs to the city. So it's established in this format with the policymaking board, but it is up to the city council to determine what the tax rate is of the library and to vote, like whether to have a judgment levy, things like that. So the city council holds the public hearing on any tax increase, the truth in taxation hearing, and the mayor forwards a recommended budget that is done usually in concert with the library. Rarely always in concert with the library. There have been times, though, when mayors and councils and library boards have disagreed on when to do a tax increase or when to build libraries or when to allocate significant capital improvement funds. So there was a time when the city council really wanted a couple of community libraries and really went to bat with the mayor, and the mayor disagreed on the timing of that. So the city council did vote to do a tax increase that enabled those libraries to move forward, and it went through the regular process where the mayor would have had the opportunity to veto it, and the council could have overridden that veto. So it's different on the ground in terms of operation and in terms of the oversight authority to some extent, but because you have the taxing authority, you still have some say. You certainly couldn't ask to have their director fired, or you couldn't interfere in their book selection. But there was a time when the council did authorize an audit of the library, a management audit for efficiency and that type of a thing. So oversight role, but not as detailed as the city, because the city made the distinction that this is a policy-making board. Katie, though, probably should follow up and give us the legal citations and such.
But what if the council didn't approve the library board's budget?
Well, the council, you don't have to approve what they give you, but if you want the library to function, then you need to approve a budget for them.
Okay.
So it's up to you whether you set the tax rate for the library and whether you approve a budget for them. If you don't do those two things, then they don't function.
Okay. And so if they wanted to increase their tax rate, the city council would have to vote to do that.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions about the library? Okay.
I don't. Does any other council members? No? Okay. And move on to local building authority.
Okay, and the local building authority, again, is an entity that's established by Utah law, and it's actually a nonprofit corporation that's created by the city council for specific purposes under state law. And the sort of high-level purpose of the local building authority is to be an entity where debt service for more than 1 year can reside, because under Utah law, the city cannot issue debt service for more than 1 year without seeking the consent of the voters. And the local building authority is a separate entity that can hold that debt service as a way of not having the bonding requirement for voters. So that's something that has been in place for a long time, and it essentially, you all as the council really have most of the authority for the LBA, because your whole purpose is to, at times, recess as the council, put your LBA hat on, and approve certain debt service or other bonding agreements. So the LBA it's not a real active entity by any stretch. Jen Bruno can say more about LBAs.
The only thing that's currently running through the LBA, the only reason you guys even have hats that you need to put on that relate to the LBA, is because that happened to be the best financing tool available at the time to help facilitate the construction of the Glendale and Marmalade libraries. So there's actually a funding tool where the library tax rate pays the LBA essentially as a landlord, and the LBA issued the debt to have the libraries built. So I'm looking at Cindy's face, hoping that I summarized that right, but I think I did. And so each year you guys have to convene as the LBA to approve that debt service, essentially. So.
Councilman Fowler.
Is that still a financial tool that we have the ability to use?
It is. The downside to it is that it doesn't come with any extra money. So it's basically just if the city were to have reached its debt capacity, then the LBA is a tool you'd want to look at because the city actually gets interest rates that are better than the LBA. But the LBA is an option that you look at if you want to bond for something that the city isn't going to own itself, which is why the library is qualified for that because the library is not technically a city asset, it's a library asset. But you pay a little bit more in interest for that, at least at the time. That was the case. I don't know if that's still the case with interest rates going on, with what they're going on with. So, but we keep it there, but we have quite a bit of bonding capacity left in the city. Go ahead.
So, like, if we wanted to build, the best example here that you're giving, Jen, is that if we wanted to build another library somewhere, then this would be a tool by which we could use to do that.
Right. At the time, the library, when they went out for a bond rating, I think because their tax rate is small, they were not able to qualify for an interest rate good enough. And I think the council at the time thought it's all the same money. It's all taxpayer money. So why not just, it's sort of like when your parent co-signs a car loan for you. It's so that, you know, there's sort of like the pledged faith of a good credit person behind you. So, yeah.
Is there any example? I mean, honestly, I'm looking at this from the idea of I have a feeling we're going to be needing to be creative in the upcoming regarding our budgets, and maybe not. We may not see the effects of COVID-19 this year exactly, but maybe in the future. And so I'm wondering if there are other examples that would be a good example of how this could be a tool. And I'm sorry, sort of off the subject of what you were talking about, Katie, and I didn't mean to get off that subject. It just, coronavirus is everywhere.
I think what we could do is we could get together with finance and do like a refresher of sort of the latest with the local building authority, and if there's any sort of new nuances to it that we haven't really dealt with it since we built those libraries. And so I'm not up to date on the latest, regulations that affect it. The state law does change about it every now and then. So, but we can check in with finance and for sure keep that in mind.
And again, it may be not a great tool at all to use, right? It, like you said, it's sort of all the same money, but again, I think we need to be looking at all of our creative options, and that just kind of like popped into my head of like, oh, I didn't even know. For 2.5 years, I put the LBA, is that the hat that we put on? And say, oh, okay, cool. I don't even know what this means, right? So this is helpful for me. 2.5 years into this, but also like kind of looking at financial stuff as we move forward with this crisis that we're in right now.
So Jen, the reason we didn't use or we didn't need the LBA for the public safety building is because that was just a bond that was voted on by the taxpayers.
Yeah, that was a bond that was voted on by taxpayers because it was a city building. The city was going to own the asset, and so the city could issue the bonds. But maybe another analogy is something that wasn't a GO bond, which is like the Eccles Theater. So the city, because it was going to be a part owner, was able to say, okay, we can get this debt for much cheaper than if we were to go through the local building authority. So why not? And we haven't even come close to hitting our credit limit yet. So essentially, it's sort of like a spare credit card. We haven't really run up the balance on our best interest rate credit card yet, and so it doesn't really make sense to use that spare credit card unless it's the only option. Like if we were bonding for, let's say we were bonding for an entity that wasn't the city. I'm trying to think of, like, let's say the county asked us to bond for one of their projects. That would be very odd, but the LBA might be a tool to look at in that case. But like I said, we can take a look at some of the new regulations with regard to LBA, because I'm not sure if some of that ownership stuff is still the same.
Yeah, then how come it's only used for libraries then, it sounds like?
It's not only used for libraries. In fact, the last time it had been used prior to those two libraries was to build a fire station. And at that time, for whatever weird reason, LBA's interest rates were lower. So the city decided to use the LBA because at the time, that was the low interest credit card. But since then, the city's bond rating is so good that our own sales tax bonds are the best credit card we have.
Okay.
Aside from GO bonds, but then you got to go to the voters.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Fun with bonds.
Any questions, council members? Cindy Gus Jensen, your hand's up again. Is that intentional?
Oh, we can't hear.
I can only see your eyes and I can't hear you.
Oh, the answer is no, it was not intentional.
Okay. Just checking. Okay. And so it looks like from the chart that the mayor, there's not a lot of executive authority under that except proposing the budget. Katie, is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh man, so that's really the place for us to run wild if we want to as a council.
Well, I think you're still going to be talking about executing bond documents, and there's still a role for the mayor from the contractual side and the proposing the budget side. So it's not a free-for-all.
And veto.
And veto. Thank you, Cindy.
Yes. Okay. Councilmember Fowler.
And so, Cindy brought this up, and veto, which reminded me of the conversation we had, a half an hour before we started this meeting. But the separation of powers, going back to the RDA, the mayor has different, responsibilities and powers under the statute. Would that be accurate, Katie? For example, we were talking about this earlier, that the RDA board doesn't have the ability to override a veto from the mayor acting as the executive director of the RDA. Now, is that a statute thing, a separation of powers thing, or a bylaws thing?
A little bit of everything. That's how I would answer that. So the RDA board issues all of its policy direction pursuant to resolution, which is different than the city council that issues its policy direction in the form of city laws as ordinances. So Utah law provides a specific veto process for budget and ordinances and tax levies. Those are the three. So in the city context, the mayor has authority to veto all three of those things because each of them are provided for under state law. And the process is the mayor vetoes, the council can override with a supermajority. In the RDA context, the mayor, the city council enacts policies pursuant to resolution, which are not specifically listed as vetoable items under the overlay of separation of powers. Remember, ordinances, budget, and tax levies. So we have some rules here in place in the city as bylaws, which provide that all resolutions have to be essentially co-signed by the mayor in order to be effective. I think this probably merits a further conversation of what the relationship between the mayor as executive director and the council as board of directors are on the RDA side. But any budget that comes before the mayor, the veto process would be the same because you have that overlay of state law. It's just only really resolutions and what you do about those policy resolutions that are analogous to ordinances but aren't adopted as ordinances. So I think that would merit further discussion between the administration and the council, and we could provide some suggestions.
Thank you.
you. Council members, any further questions on separation of powers? Okay, great. Seeing none, then I just had, Cindy just wanted to raise one other thing about, we talked about our conversation with Amy right before our council meeting.
Yes. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so just for the new council members as background, years ago, the RDA separation of powers was not as clear as it is now. It's evolved over the past maybe 15 years, but more so, much more so in the past three and a half years. Mayor Biskupski asked the council to join with her in really doing the separation of powers in the way that the state statute intended, the most recent state statutes. And so the council has endeavored over this past 3.5 years to do that. And I think it's actually working out very well. The RDA is now functioning using the city attorney's resources, the resources of the city finance department. And the big change for us as staff is that it used to be, especially 15 years ago, it's evolved to be less so, but it used to be that the council staff and the RDA staff were mirrors of one another. So the council chair coordinated the council staff, and the RDA chair coordinated the RDA staff, and was really involved in the day-to-day functioning. The mayor essentially for many years had no role functionally in the day-to-day. So now with the complete implementation of separation of powers, the agenda function, the preparation of the agenda, and the staff support of the council members is now transferred to the council office. And so we are trying to fulfill the same role for RDA that we fulfill for the city council, and it generally works okay, but there are times when we're a little unsure of the rules, and the best example is the one that City Attorney Katie Lewis just gave, where the bylaws of the RDA address this part of the RDA business in a way that isn't really the same as the city. As the council, you guys have adopted quite a few policies that are really internal housekeeping policy type things. And so now that the city administrative and legislative branches have really put things in order with the separation of power for the big issues in RDA, the budget and the big policy issues of housing funding and those types of things. Now that all of that work has been done, it would help us if we could spend some time with you to figure out things like the issue that Katie raised about the bylaws. Also bringing some issues up with you to ask you if you want certain city council policies to be recreated with RDA so they're exactly parallel, or there may be cases where they should be slightly different. We would like to, instead of working off of two sets of rules or one set of rules and the other guessing, we're hoping that maybe in this year we could engage with you in that conversation. Again, it's all housekeeping, really, but some nuances that are probably interesting, but more just to get some real clarity in terms of operational.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was writing some stuff down. Did you talk about the agendas?
No, I'll mention that too.
Okay.
One of the things that we have been doing is operating in a way that is, and it's really for ease of the city recorder, the preference of our most recent city recorder. to have very separate agendas. So a separate agenda for redevelopment agency, for local building authority, for board of canvassers, for city council briefing, and for city council formal business. It is possible, if the council's interested, to consolidate those into one agenda. So we're not talking about changing any roles of council members. You have an RDA chair, you have an RDA vice chair, you have a council chair, you have an RDA or council vice chair. But what we would like to experiment with is putting things on one agenda with a section for RDA, a section for city council, a section when you have business before you that is local building authority, and then, a section for board of canvassers when you're doing that. So the only thing that you need to move among those entities is a motion. And that, we've checked with the attorney's office, is entirely within the law. It would take a little bit of transition, and we'd have to come to you with some samples and things like that to get your input, but it might make for easier functioning, because we, right now, if you have a separate agenda, then that means you have a separate set of minutes and separate noticing and a lot of separate things. And so we think that it would make our functioning a little smoother if we could experiment with putting things in one document, but still retaining the grouping of the items so that they can be managed by the chair that you've elected to deal with those items.
Councilmember Fowler.
Thanks. I realize that this probably is not part of today's discussion, and I did have a conversation with Cindy and Chris earlier today about streamlining processes and making sure that things function in a parallel way. I guess this question is for Katie more than anything. It sounds like, and I sort of voiced my concern a little bit earlier when I was on the phone with Cindy and Chris of this seems like we're trying to merge things, and I'm still trying to wade through it and figure it out myself, but I've always been a little bit confused about RDA being a separate entity. It sounds like what we're trying to do right now is merge the RDA into being under the umbrella of the city as less of its own entity and more of its own department. I'm wondering, and maybe right now isn't the time for this discussion. So I'm kind of throwing this out at the chair, at Jen and Cindy and Katie. What the pros and cons are of where we were, where it seems like we're trying to get to. I think I have some questions. I'm all about streamlining processes and making sure that people know where to go, how to go, and what to do. But I think there's been some tension between this idea of like, what is a separate entity? What is a city department? Where do people belong? How do they belong there? Who do they answer to? When do they answer? And I think these are some of the questions that Cindy's raising right now. And I guess I'm throwing this out there. Sorry, Katie, I kind of put you on the spot, but really I don't have a question for you. I'm mostly just like talking. Or maybe we can come back in the future sooner rather than later answering some of these questions. Like, what does it mean to be a separate entity inside of a city, right? I think that is something that since I was elected kind of was like, okay, you're a separate entity, yeah. We're the board, we still control all of these things, and yet where does that lie? I think it really does stem into this separation of powers and what this looks like, similar to an enterprise fund or the library or the airport, right? It's kind of figuring out where those roles are. and maybe coming back for all of us to look at what the pros and cons are of that. Because I know there has been tension in the past, and it seems like there's been a little bit of tension recently on some of that. So just throwing this out there as a discussion point that maybe I can get in the future, all of us to talk about.
Sure.
That sense at all?
I think that all makes sense, and it sounds like there are some things both from a practical perspective and from a role clarity perspective that would merit a more detailed discussion. I think some of this is recognizing that the RDA is both a city department and a separate legal entity, and thinking about Utah Code 17C as a process to create a way for the city to achieve its goals through a separate tool. That's essentially what the RDA is, and how much independence that entity has, and how much it, the types of projects that it undertakes really have to do with the direction of the elected officials who sit as the executive director and the RDA board. That all flows from that same leadership structure, and those leaders taking a look at the RDA and understanding that it can only use its revenue for certain purposes and for certain projects, and how and oftentimes is more flexible and more nimble than the city is. So I think that it does merit a separate conversation. The final thing that I would say about agendas, it really isn't a separation of powers issue, and I think that it's sort of how the city wants to do its business, and there are reasons, I think, over the years that the agenda, it's been a once-a-month meeting, and there are reasons why many cities throughout the state have RDA agendas as part of city council every Tuesday. If you've got an RDA matter, you switch hats and you do it, and that there may be a pro to that too in increasing how nimble the RDA can be, because they're not waiting for a meeting once a month. So there, it probably does merit further conversation and role clarity.
Thank you.
Council members have any other questions about that? Sure, okay, I don't see any. Okay, so I think that, or no, we can go on to other announcements or anything that need to be made, Cindy?
Just one thing to keep in mind, and that is there are some functions that are on the docket that council members would typically attend out of state, educational things and fact-finding type things. The Utah League of Cities and Towns has canceled their April function as of today. We haven't heard anything from the Downtown Alliance. And I think there were a couple of other conferences coming up, but it would help us if you could be thinking, the mayor for the administrative branch has determined not to have travel at this time unless there's some really very specific justification. But that is a separation of powers example where the city council office is not subject to that direction. It's, more advisory or informational. So we need to come back to you at some point soon to get your direction on whether you, how you'd like to handle those things. And it'll help us know how to spend our staff time. Should we be doing reservations or not doing reservations or canceling reservations? So we will come back to you with that also.
Okay. Okay, so we have our special executive meeting.
Corey, do we have to break?
Special limited formal meeting. Sure, so we are starting that at 7, right? so we can, do we want to take a little break for 20 minutes or? Okay, and how do we want to handle breaks? Do we end the call and start a new call, or just everybody mutes and walks away?
I would suggest that.
Okay,
Or turn off your
Alright.
camera if you want as well.
okay, perfect. Okay, so I'll see everybody back here at just, if you could try to be back at maybe like 2 minutes early so that we can make sure we've got everybody ready to go right at 7.
James?
Okay, thanks everybody.